What is going on, everybody? Welcome on into this edition of Warchant TV. I'm Aslan Hajivandi, joined by founder and administrator. I'm doing it all.
There you go.
Warchant.com, Jane Williams, managing editor, Ira Schoffel. Warchant.com, your ultimate Seminoles sports source. Use that promo code Warchant30 for 30 days of access. If you could also maybe hit the thumbs up button indicating that you like this video on YouTube. It simply just kind of puts it out there in the forefront of the internet. You're not going to get tracked or anything crazy by hitting the thumbs up button, I assure you of that. Gentlemen, we meet again on a Saturday. We were able to watch another FSU football scrimmage. It's crazy. They're just letting us walk in and watch them play football. I can't believe it. Afterwards, I don't want to set anything up too much for you guys. Let you explore the space here. But afterwards, Mike Norvell said that he felt the defense dominated the day. Gene Williams, do you agree with that sentiment from the head football coach?
It's hard to disagree. When we were out there, we saw outside of that first series, which is crazy. Travis drives him down the field, 75 yards? And it's like, I'm thinking, here we go again, man. This is crazy that the offense is doing this. And then someone turned the faucet off at that point. The offense was almost completely shut down the rest of the day. I think this is not unusual. I think I've noticed already people kind of overreacting to stuff. And I had to go back in my memory because it had been a while since I've actually attended scrimmages in the spring. I think we had to go back to maybe 2009, Ira, the last time we've seen an actual scrimmage in person. But this kind of back and forth, especially the inconsistency by the offense, is very common. This happened all the time. And I think a lot of things, to kind of be the glass half full guy, I thought a lot of the mistakes we saw in offense, I think, are very correctable. A lot of the pre-snap stuff we saw, they were working Zane Herring a lot at center, and they need to. They need a competent backup center, and it's a new position for him, and he struggled a lot with the snaps. That put him behind the sticks a couple times. And the receivers, the young receivers that were so good in the first scrimmage really kind of fell flat on their face with drops, with not finishing routes, not being in good communication with the quarterbacks. But this improves with reps and with times. But you do have to ultimately you got to give credit to the defense. I thought they were, after that first series, they were dialed in. And I think, Aslan, you sent me your kind of overall impressions. I think the one thing, and I agree totally, that there wasn't like one or two players that just jumped out and dominated, but it was a good effort, I thought, by all three levels. The line was getting pressure, doing well there. The linebackers were making nice open field tackles. And for the most part, the defensive backs were pretty tight coverage. I think they got bailed out a couple times by these young receivers that came up short. But, nothing glaring, but I think overall pretty positive for what we saw in the defense today.
Ira, how stoked are the fans going to be if they come into Doak Campbell on April 10th and see the defense play the way they played earlier today?
Well, I don't think it's going to be as dominant performance. I mean, one of the things that was kind of interesting from this scrimmage was, last week, Mike Norvell was pretty complimentary to the offense overall, liked what he saw from the quarterbacks, praised the young receivers and the running backs. This week, and then Kenny Dillingham came in and kind of was the bad cop. He pointed out a lot of things he wasn't happy with. This week, it was like they reversed roles. Mike Norvell was not happy at all. You could see during the scrimmage there were several things he wasn't happy about. We could talk about that a little bit more in detail, but he was not real happy. And in the press conference, he expressed that. When we spoke to him afterwards, he was not happy with a lot of things about the offense. He didn't think the quarterbacks took the underneath stuff enough. They took some coverage sacks that they shouldn't have taken. Other than Jashaun Corbin, there really wasn't anybody on offense that he seemed to be really happy with. But then Kenny Dillingham came in and he played a little bit of good cop. He kind of explained some of it away. And one of the big explanations, which I think is legit, is he said they put, the receivers and they put everybody in some tough situations. Last week, I think, if you think about the young receivers last week, Malik McClain, Kentron Portier, even Josh Burrell, his few catches, a lot of those were kind of wide open plays. They were schemed up and they basically just ran the route, caught the ball, and made a big play. But it wasn't like they were just out beating great coverage one-on-one. Today, I think, was more about that. I think it was more, we're not scheming you open, go get open. And they didn't. The secondary really shut them down. There just weren't a lot of places to throw the ball. And where Norvell and I think Kenny Dillingham both were not happy was the quarterbacks just kind of kept trying to extend plays to make big plays, which might be a byproduct of being in a quarterback competition where they're trying to make big plays. And instead of just either throwing the ball away or dumping it off. I mean, I don't know how many of those sacks. I don't know how many. If you were actually counting sacks, those touch sacks, it might have been 20 on the day. But a lot of them, Jordan Travis would have gotten away from. Mackenzie Milton might have gotten away from. But you could tell that the coach was the coaches were so mad about the quarterbacks not taking the underneath stuff or throwing it away that Mike Norvell was very quick to blow that whistle and call it a sack.
I like your theories there, Ira. That thing makes me feel a lot better about the way the offense performed in terms of them maybe not scheming things up and trying to make it as difficult as possible for them, as you do see the defensive stats here on your screen. So then, Gene, is it just one of those cases, I guess, to your point about, some days the offense is going to get the better half of the defense? It kind of goes back and forth in a spring like this, or are there concerns maybe about whether or not these young receivers are kind of coming along fast enough, or in terms of just the inefficiency of the offense? Do you think it's a talent thing, or is it just one of those things that happens in spring where it's back and forth, and today was the defense's day?
Yeah, with respect to the receivers, this is pretty common, I think, by young receivers to see this inconsistency. But the thing is, the problem is you're going to need them. You know what you're getting out of Keyshawn Helton. You know what you're getting out of Pokey Wilson. The more talented players are the Portiers, the McLeans, the Burrells. I think these are the guys that can potentially give you that next level elite plays at wide receiver, and you're going to get these kind of growing pains, I think, with these guys quite often. And Ira and I agreed on this. We talked a little bit about this. I think the one thing that's kind of lost in the shuffle by the offense, I'll let him talk about Jayshon Corbin, who's one of the bright spots. But to me, looking at Tate Rodemaker, I thought he by far was the best quarterback of the three. Now, it's not going to show up in his stats because the receivers really kind of sold him out. I mean, there was at least twice I thought there were long touchdown passes he had that the receivers did not hold on to the ball. I saw at least Portier once or twice I thought got a step on the defensive back and the ball was laid there, but he just kind of slowed down on his route. I asked the coaches what was going on there. I really didn't get a good explanation, probably because they didn't want to sell out the receiver, but that was just poor route running by the receivers, I thought. But that's some of the stuff you're going to get with these young receivers that have the talent. But, man, they got to work on this consistency and get on the same page with the quarterbacks, because you see it could be there. I mean, you could have easily the storyline could have been Tate Rodemaker throws 2 or 3 touchdowns and puts his hat into the ring of the quarterback competition. I think had those plays, had the receivers done the job they were supposed to do on Saturday.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, not to, it's difficult. These scrimmages are difficult, and we try to provide a lot of qualifiers in everything we write above the stats we just posted. We try to qualify some things. It's very seldom apples to apples. And so Tate Rodemaker's out there usually with the second team offense, second team defense. And I feel like the second team offense is better than the second team defense. When you look at, because there's so many guys banged up on defense, especially in that secondary, he's really going up against walk-ons for the most part in that secondary. And I think he's got an advantage with some of the receivers. He's got Toffoli, which is Toffoli's going to have a big edge against most of those guys on defense, second team. So anyway, there's a caveat there to that. But I would say, to Gene's point, Tate Rodemaker is playing better and better and better. I never thought he was quite as bad as some people thought last year. I thought it was just a bad situation. And, man, I think he's getting more confident. Those deep balls are pretty. Mm-hmm. And it's nice to have a tall quarterback who can see downfield. So, he brings some things to the table. And to Gene's point, he probably had 2 40-plus bombs to Kentron Portier that should have been touchdowns if the routes were run full speed. And then Malik McLean, who we all like, another freshman receiver. It's a tough catch. It's a contested catch in the end zone, but he couldn't complete the catch. It came loose when he landed on the ground. But those, I mean, like you said, he could have 3 touchdowns and 200 yards passing, and the fan base would have been like, what's going on? Again, it's not quite apples to apples. It'll be interesting. We haven't really seen him get any reps with the ones much at all. I don't know if we've seen him go against the first-team defense. So that would be curious. I'd like to see that. I wonder if they'll do that at any point in the next week and a half and, this last couple weeks of spring, and see how he handles it, because the speed of the game would definitely be different with those DBs out there.
I was trying to keep an eye on the defense to kind of double back to your point, Ira, about maybe the quarterbacks being a little more ambitious than they should have been in terms of looking downfield and trying to make big plays, that being a byproduct of them competing against one another. I mean, did you see more stuff underneath? I mean, or you just take what Kenny was saying kind of at face value that there were things to be made and maybe there was a little too much pressing going on by the quarterback?
I didn't see a ton of stuff underneath that was open, but I also didn't see them get rid of the ball. That to me, I thought was the biggest mistake you saw, especially from Jordan Travis. And I think part of it is Jordan knows he can get away from pressure. So he's extending plays. But, man, at some point you got to get rid of the ball. And so I think that was that was a big thing. I didn't see as many safety valves. They may have been there. Kenny Dillingham was up in the press box calling plays. Adam Fuller was up in the press box, so they had a much better view than we did. But it wasn't like you saw wide open guys in the flats all day just being ignored.
To dovetail on that, what I really liked about McKenzie in the first scrimmage was I thought exactly that, his ability to kind of buy a little time and dump it off when he needed to at the last minute, kind of be crafty with able to manufacture some yards. And it didn't, again, like you said, I think all the quarterbacks are really trying to go for that home run. Man, there's nothing wrong with a little bloop single now and then, man. Just keep the ball going, throw the ball away. And I think that's what was frustrating for Norvell and Dillingham, that these guys didn't take was given to them in the game. So, I mean, again, you hope these are things they can correct. But, yeah, it definitely was a step back, I thought, for the quarterbacks on the whole.
The other thing I would say is we should take into account is a lot of those drives and a lot of those incompletions. It's not like Aslan showed the stats before. There were a lot of incomplete passes today. But it wasn't like guys were, open and they missed the throws. There were a few pass breakups. But for the most part, it was receiver breaks underneath, pass goes up top, or receiver goes deep, the pass goes. They weren't on the same page. And I think you just had a lot of cases, and Kenny Dillingham talked about it afterwards, that you just have, and I think maybe Norvell did, but you had situations where they saw a different coverage than what they've seen before. I think the defense threw out some new coverages that they didn't get last week, and the receivers read it wrong. And the quarterback may have read it wrong sometimes. We can't say that for sure it was always the receiver's fault, but your guess is with the young receiver core that the odds are that they were reading those things wrong.
I do like how Kenny said afterwards, like, as an offense, you've got two options. You either have to be elite in your efficiency, or you have to have explosive plays. And they were neither on Sunday. But I think it's so much easier to be explosive than it is to go and have a pop off a 12-play drive, although we kind of saw Jordan Travis do that last week in the first drive of that scrimmage. So I think maybe that's why we're seeing those quarterbacks try to look for that big play, because they know that, they're probably not going to string together a 10, 12-play drive. But that's also kind of a good sign, showing that the defense might be firming up a little bit. Last thing I was going to share, at least in terms of a personal perspective on things, like I brought up again, just the whole fact that maybe the way these quarterbacks are playing is because they do realize they're competing against each other for this job. There was like a one play with Jordan Travis where it is I don't even know how to describe watching that kid play football, but I can't imagine, like, defensive coordinators must just think, like, Adam Fuller must have nightmares about Jordan Travis. He doesn't look like he's running that fast, but then he's 15 yards down the field. And it's not, and these are, a lot of these plays, I don't think you guys can maybe disagree. I don't think a lot of these plays were plays that he would get sacked. Maybe they get a different angle at him, but I still think they would miss. I still think he would get past him, and he still would run down the field for 15 yards. But on one of the plays, he ran for about 15 yards, and like when he finally got touched downfield, I kind of like saw him like grimace a little bit and like wince about he was frustrated either because he thought he could have probably kept running, or somebody didn't run their route properly, or like maybe he missed a throw. But like you can just, even after he made a good play, flush out of the pocket, scramble 15 yards down the field, you can still see on his face and his body language that he was upset because he knows there's probably a bigger play to be made out there. So I'm kind of encouraged by him not, just being happy with taking what the defense is giving him, but trying to be more kind of ambitious to what's out there. So that's my good news from the scrimmage observation.
And just to follow up on him, I think from what we've seen in these 3 weeks, his throwing has gotten so much better. His command of the offense is good. If you could guarantee me that he could play a season without getting hurt, I would think strongly about him being the guy, because because as you said, he is so elusive. He's that part of his game is not really even being used right now. I mean, he did scramble for some yardage, but it's kind of a last resort. It's not what they're trying to do. But what's always in the back of my mind, no matter how well he plays, is could he get through a season and stay healthy? And if he doesn't, because once you take away, some quarterbacks can play hurt. The kid from Pitt last year could play hurt. There's some quarterbacks, but Jordan Travis, because of the way he plays, he can't play hurt. So that's a problem. I was curious what your thoughts on special teams. You guys left to go do the interviews, but Ryan Fitzgerald hit a 53-yard field goal, which was nice. I mean, plenty of distance. And Parker, they also both kicked, I think, like 45 yards while you guys were gone as well. So it looked to me like Ryan Fitzgerald had the better day at kicker. It seemed like maybe you saw some improvement from your boy Mastromano from last week?
A little better punting. Like the first time they ran out there, I think they both had 2 punts each, and I forget who the other punter that's competing with him right now is, but neither of them hit it over 40 yards. But after that, I think Mastromano had a 50-yarder, did a rugby-style one that carried, I think, plus 45 yards. So a little bit better on that, which was encouraging. But I think early on, didn't they both miss field goals though? Like early on.
Yeah. Fitzgerald hit the uprights, and then Grotehouse just whiffed on one. I don't know. It went wide. So it was a rough start. Those are both chip shots, basically inside 40 yards. So at that point, it wasn't looking good. But yeah, to Ira's point, they both bounced back late in the scrimmage. He was out there for those. So that's always better when they finish on a high note, because that was a rough start to the scrimmage for the special teams.
Fitzgerald, he won that little battle though, because he at least hit the upright. I think you get partial, credit. And then also after you guys left towards the end, Lawrence Toafili had about 4 straight carries that were nice late in the scrimmage, and Trayshawn Ward had like a 23-yard run that was actually pretty nice. But the running game, that was the other thing defensively. We're talking so much about the quarterbacks and the receivers, but last week the running game, they got a lot of big plays. I do think Trayshawn Ward can play, but to Aslan's point, a lot of those were just they were poor fits from the defense, and there were big holes to run through. It seemed like a lot of that got shored up as well. I thought Steven Dix seemed to play, a lot better, and Emmett Rice isn't out there right now, but I think Dix, he looks like he belongs, but alongside Amari Gaynor.
Well, isn't the most encouraging thing that we saw was maybe that Derek McClendon starting to make plays, because we know Johnson can play. I mean, he's going to be a legit defensive end, but the whole question is, can they get any pressure on the other side? The fact that he actually got out there and got some pressure today, that's got to be really encouraging for the defense.
Yeah, that was a tough one to kind of get a feel for, because I think I had him down with 3 pressures, but so many of them just felt like backside, 2.5 seconds, not like waiting for a play to develop downfield. Nothing did, and he kind of, came in and cleaned up. It wasn't him like, coming off the edge like with speed and beating his guy. There was one play though, I should say though, I take it back. There was one play where
he blew up Darius Washington.
He got his hands inside Darius Washington and got him on roller skates. So that was pretty good, and encouraging to see. You did mention Emmett Rice, Ira. We did see him out there limping noticeably, but he did not have a brace on his leg, so that's probably a little bit of a positive thing. But man, there's a lot of guys that either Wyatt Rector was a guy that I saw that wasn't in pads. I asked you if Cam McDonald was out there, because I think I saw Jackson West out there a bunch. You asked Norvell about injuries and whether or not this is atypical of a spring. He had a kind of a coy response about it's been so long since he's had a regular spring. So
Deflect.
Yeah. But who do you think in terms of is the offense more healthy than the defense, or vice versa? You think right now?
That's a good question. I think I would say probably the offense is overall more healthy. Cam McDonald was out there; he just wasn't taking a lot of reps. He must have just been limited. But it looked like, and to the point he did make, which I think is he's being very truthful and giving us a little insight, is they've got some guys who are getting closer to getting back. We haven't seen Bavion Johnson practice really all spring. We don't know what's up with him, but he was out there at least in the pre-scrimmage part, participating, doing some snapping, things like that. So it seems like he's getting closer. There were some other guys as well that were in uniform. Renardo Green was in uniform. He hasn't been participating, so he's got to be getting closer. The Jadarius Green McKnight played some. He had been out. So I do think they've lost some guys. They've had some significant injuries, Thomas Schrader and a few other guys, Leonard Warner and Damori Tate. But it does seem like they're starting to get some of those other guys back, which would be good. There's still, a week or two left in spring, so it'd be good to get some of those guys back.
And I think it's encouraging, especially when we talk about coverage, how well the defensive backs play. You got a lot of guys. I mean, that's the position really that's been decimated. You don't have Akeem out there. I'm trying to think of all the other guys. I know Brownlee wasn't out there today. Did Green, Ronaldo Green? I don't think he's been out there. So, I mean, you got some really good players that have not been out there yet, but yet you're seeing some good competition. You're seeing more consistent coverage. So I think that segment is maybe the most encouraging. And then I also think some nice job on the interior. Fabian Lovett and Coop had nice days today as well.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, those guys played really well. Fabian Lovett, particularly, but Cooper too. They both had some really – and True Thompson, man, that kid was at the very end, he was cramping up because he played a lot of snaps, and Dennis Briggs. And those guys, they put in a lot of work today. The other thing, real quick, is they are 3 weeks into spring now, and it's probably not fun anymore. And it'll get fun again the few days leading up to the spring game, because they'll be excited about that. And they can see the finish line. In the first week or two are awesome, but right now this is the dog days, and so I think you saw some of that. It didn't seem like there was quite as much energy overall as maybe what we saw last week.
Yeah. And last on the injury front, Mako Dotson. We still have not seen.
Well, there's another one. Yeah, so you got like four guys. Four guys are competing for starting jobs that aren't even out there.
It's crazy, man. It is crazy to think about all the talent they have, that's available but not in use right now. So, with that said, there's plenty more observations. This is simply us just talking about it for 20 minutes. If you want it in a nice digestible written format, Gene Williams got you covered, as well as Ira over on warchant.com. Use that promo code at the bottom of your screen to check out the observations. There's also
one more
unofficial stats. I'm getting there, Ira. I'm never going to sign off before I say one last thing. We also have unofficial stats on the Tribal Council that Ira and myself tabulated. Defense, give me a little slack. Ira is really good at math, so I'm sure his yardages were kind of spot on. What else is it? What else we got in store, Ira?
I'm missing a receiver, by the way, for 3 yards. The quarterbacks and the receivers aren't at. There's a catch for 3 yards. I got to go back and find. It's kind of driving me crazy. But the one thing I want to say is Michael Langston was also out there. They had several recruits at the scrimmage today who came because it was quasi open, I guess, to the media or to the fans. So some recruits were there. He interviewed Nico Marchio, the quarterback commit, was in town again. That guy's in Tallahassee more than he is out west. Right. And so Michael talked to him and some other recruits. That's a lot of that's already up on the premium recruiting board, and I'll have his story up here shortly as well.
Yeah, I saw him actually walk by us in the bleachers, Nico. And I'm a pretty well put together kid, man. He's still in high school too, so that bodes well. All right, let's see if I can do this right. For Gene and Ira, I'm Aslan. Thanks for watching this edition of Warchant TV. Thumbs up.
Last thing.
Not done.
Shout out to Corey Clark in Indianapolis.
That's right. That's right. Sweet 16.
We'll have plenty from him. Yeah.
5 p.m. Sunday. Also check out the David Nichols interview that Ira did as well. We've got everything covered. There's even a live baseball thread going on right now as they're playing Wake Forest, trying to get that series win. We're your ultimate Seminoles sports source. We mean it. Have a good one, everybody.